Today I'm sitting here with Bill. Bill is an older gentleman, and give us a brief summary of what of your life so far.
Oh boy, that's how do you summarize 70 years,
Right.
65 years, whatever, since my childhood began to end. But basically, I define myself as a helicopter pilot. That's where my mentality is. I went to a Navy flight school. After flying airplanes and training, and then I got into helicopters, and then I went to Vietnam, and I flew in helicopters in Vietnam, and then after that I flew helicopters for the C.I.A. in Laos, a certain little subset of the Vietnam War that most people know nothing about. Then I got out away from the government, and I started flying helicopters civilian-wise, and I did that all the way up until 1996.
What was your childhood like?
My childhood was, I didn't think it was all that much different. We were kind of on the side of being poor, but not dirt floor poor by any means. Bare cement floor poor, perhaps. But we did okay. We always had plenty of food, and parents were supportive. They were especially supportive of me because I was a good student, and I liked studying, and I liked learning, and they really encouraged that and supported that.
What brought you to helicopters?
That was just a fluke because when I was a young man in grammar school, I lived right off the departure end of Hamilton Air Force Base in Marin County, California. And I would see the F-86s taking off and joining up in formation, and it looked really cool. And I saw one of the original big flying wings, and I forget the designation for it, B-30 something. Anyway, fly over the school one day. I thought, wow, it'd be really cool to be a pilot. And one of my best friend at that time, his father was an airline pilot. And they lived well, and they had money, and he had time off. And I said, okay, that's the life for me. When I'm going to go into service, learn to be a pilot, and then I'm going to be an airline pilot. Didn't quite work out just that way.
How so?
Well, I went in. Never really thought I could be a pilot, so I never really decided to go for it. And so I said, well, I wanted to be an officer. That was my main goal in life. I grew up in the afterglow of World War II. Everybody and anybody who had done anything in World War II was a hero to me. Because I was born on VJ Day. Do you know what VJ Day is?
No, please
Okay,
explain.
let me educate you. VJ Day is the day that Japan surrendered.
Okay.
That was my second birthday.
Okay.
And boy, we had parades downtown with all the veterans marching down the main street and big bands going boom ba ba and flag teams and all kinds of fancy parades every Veterans Day, every Memorial Day, anytime there was a chance. Armistice Day, Flag Day. Some of those days are all the same now, by the way. And so I was really impressed. And I thought, well, I want to be in the military. I'd like to make a career of the military. So I took all the exams for all the military academies I wanted to go to. I wasn't picky. I just wanted to be an officer. And I could go to Annapolis or the Army Officers Training School, West Point, or even tried the Coast Guard, and I applied to the Air Force. But I was weak in math.
Weak in math.
All my test scores were weak in math, plus I had absolutely no political pull whatsoever anywhere to get a senator or somebody to write me a letter of recommendation. So I said, okay, well, in that case, I better get a degree. And then I'll have a degree, then I can at least get in the service, and I'll be an officer that way. So I started going to college. I went to Napa Community College, and I got in 5 semesters. And I was kind of bogged down. I had started studying engineering, and I wasn't the greatest student, and I ran into problems with calculus and advanced physics. And I said, oh, this is really awful. I actually failed my first course of calculus. Had to take it over. And I didn't do well on my first course of advanced physics. So I thought maybe I better change careers, and I wasn't really sure what to do. But out in the quad of the college, there was this guy in this funny green uniform, and he had a fold-out demonstration. It was a mock-up of a cockpit of a T-34 Mentor trainer. And he was showing it off. And I went over and kind of looked and listened. I wasn't that impressed. Yeah, maybe you could be a pilot, but I just still didn't think I could do it. But then he hooked me because he said, when you finish flight school, you get to be a second lieutenant. I said, oh, cool, I'll go. Where do I sign? And I signed up for flight school, never having seen the inside of an airplane.
Okay.
Never having flown in anything. My first flight was from San Francisco to Pensacola to go to flight school. And they had a program in those days, and most veterans are appalled when I say this, but they had a program in those days where it were called an aviation cadet. You went directly to flight school, passed boot camp, passed officers training, passed OCS or whatever else they call all those programs, immediately directly into flight school.
That's pretty cool.
And it was. And I learned military stuff in flight school. And we had classes on leadership and all that was kind of hokey, I thought, but just hanging around with guys who were commissioned officers at the time.
Yeah.
And just being a peer group with all those guys, I learned how to be an officer, at least how to conduct myself personally and be a gentleman, an officer and a gentleman. So I made it through flight school, and I wasn't the best student, but I wasn't the worst by any means. And it was 14, 15 months of airplane flying first. We flew the T-34 Mentor I mentioned earlier for the beginning training, for the primary part of flight training. And the secondary part was the T-28 Charlie fighter bomber, which is a pretty substantial airplane and just powerful and just lots of fun to fly. And we got to do, I got to do formation flying and instrument flying. And the only thing I didn't get to do was gunnery. Usually they had a course where you got to go out and practice shooting your 50 caliber guns at a target that another guy would be towing behind him, a few hundred yards behind him. But that part got cut out while I was going through. And then as soon as the last day of airplane flying was I landed a T-28 fighter bomber on the aircraft carrier Lexington, USS Lexington. And I landed 8 times, and that was how I earned my gold wings, which I'm showing you here. I have had my gold wings made into a ring. Those are my original Navy wings from 1965.
Okay.
September 7th, 1965. 9765. No,
okay.
8. Anyway, and that was a big thrill for me, but I didn't actually get the wings until December when I finished flight school. But I went right over to helicopters, and I flew the little whirlybird MASH looking whirlybird thing.
I don't. What is that?
The TV program MASH.
Oh, I've heard of MASH.
Really?
I might be a little too young to know everything, but I do know what you are talking about.
Okay, it's a little bubble nose, big, fat, round, clear bubble nose.
Okay.
And it's basically what you see at fairs, people getting rides at fairs. But that was what they used. The Army used that in Korea to haul the wounded out of the field. So I flew that at first, and then I jumped over and flew the H-34, which has become my favorite helicopter. Only because it's like the Stockholm Syndrome. I've flown it so much that I just fell in love with it. Can't break away. So
I think it's very fascinating that you were gung-ho to go to the military. I feel like, you correct me if I'm wrong, but back in that time, I feel like not a lot of people wanted to just be shipped off straight to Vietnam. Do you have family background in the military, grandparents or father, mother?
The timing was such, Jacob, that most of my contemporaries in flight school at that time all grew up like I did in the afterglow of World War II. They all wanted to be in the military and be heroes. And me too. I wanted to be a military hero. And that was before the Vietnam War. I was still in flight school when the Vietnam War started.
Okay.
So it was going on undercover sort of for a couple of years, but then it finally actually started happening. I think it was actually 65. So that's when we all said, oh, yeah, we're going to have our own war. We were excited about it.
Really? How so? How come?
Oh, just because we joined the military to serve our country, and we were all pumped up over the World War II stuff.
Yeah, you grow up.
We wanted to be heroes and protect our country.
I'm curious. This is very fascinating. I just like history that's not necessarily documented. You have the whole World War II, but then after it's how was it like growing up after World War II? Going down the street and seeing what?
Well, it was pretty normal, I think, except that, like I said, during the holidays, like Memorial Day and Veterans Day and stuff, there would be a huge parade
Mhm.
with the big bands going boo ba ba down the street, and thousands of people lining the streets to watch, and hundreds of people in the parade. So it was very impressive.
Okay.
And the veterans were very happy. I think everybody was really happy that World War II was over. It was a hard time.
Mhm. Talk about your experience in the Vietnam War.
Alrighty. Well, again, I got the H-34 that I flew in flight school, and then I went to a little air base adjacent to Camp Lejeune in North Carolina called New River Marine Corps Air Facility or Station. I forget if it's an air station or air facility, but it's there to service Camp Lejeune. And that's where we went, and we did. We actually trained with guys who had actually already been to Vietnam,
Mhm.
and so they were able to give us a little bit of benefit of their knowledge from what they had experienced. But it was a constantly changing war, so what they taught us wasn't unvaluable, but it certainly we had to improve and improvise. But we learned how to land, take 3 or 4 helicopters and go land at a big field and dump troops off, and landed in what we call confined areas where there's just a hole in the trees and just barely have room to set the helicopter down. And we did formation flying because we did that in Vietnam. So we just practiced our skills until we were ready to go to Vietnam. And then 6 months later, I went to Vietnam. Flew around there for, actually only flew there about 11 months of my 13 months there. But it was challenging and it was exciting, and I felt really good about what I did. We supported the troops in the field.
Mhm.
The troops were out in the field looking for the enemy to find him and defeat him.
Mhm.
And we would drop, a battalion of Marines out in the field. They would go on what they call search and destroy missions,
Mhm.
seek out the enemy and kill him, basically. And so after they'd been out there 2 or 3 days, they needed food, they needed water. We could take them mail. We could occasionally sneak them a warm beer, which they really appreciated.
Mhm.
And then whenever, of course, they got involved or anything or got wounded or sick or snake bit or tiger chewed or all kinds of things can happen to you out in the field. And the enemy had what they called punji pits, which were bamboo stakes sticking up like a tiger trap, a hole in the ground with leaves over it, and then really sharp bamboo stakes planted in the bottom of the hole. So if you stepped on the leaves, you would fall into the hole, and those bamboo stakes would actually go through your foot.
Oh, wow.
It was and they were dipped in manure, so you would get a nasty infection.
Oh, that's pretty.
It was
That's
evil,
gnarly.
evil,
That's
but
evil.
they were defending their countryside,
Uh-huh.
their homes. So a lot of guys got wounded. So once we got the troops out in the field, and we'd have a regular schedule basically to take them food and water. And then a company might break up into 3 platoons or even smaller groups. And so a company might have 4 or 5 landing zones out in the woods. So we'd take 3 or 4 loads and we'd land at 2 or 3 places and land supplies or ammunition or water. And then at each place pick up anybody who might be sick or wounded and bring them back to the hospital. And we did that day and night, 24 hours a day for 395 days.
So you're basically the man that gets in and gets out.
Yeah. Taxi drivers, bus drivers, truck drivers.
Okay. Okay.
Airborne truck drivers.
Uh-huh. So you never step foot on the battlefield per se, just in your helicopter.
Actually, I did.
Okay.
And there's this position in the military called forward air controller. He's a guy who out in the ground with the troops, who's a pilot who knows how to communicate to the fighter bomber pilots and the helicopter pilots so that they can coordinate with the grunts, because the grunts, the ground pounders, the soldiers, Marines, I can't call them soldiers.
I love all your terminology. It's cool.
The grunts on the ground didn't understand aviation, so a pilot had to be out with the battalion commander with a radio, with 2 different radios, with a guy to carry each radio to work on different frequencies. So we had a little situation with our ship. We were aboard ship at one point, and we went back to the Philippines to Subic Bay, huge Navy base, beautiful harbor in, I think, the western Philippines. And we had some problem with fuel contamination in our major fuel tanks for the helicopters. So we had to go back to Subic Bay, park the aircraft carrier, and so we had about 13 days of nothing to do.
Mhm.
So we, of course, would go downtown and drink beer and dance with the local girls at the local bars. Well, during one of these conversation with one of these lovelies at one of the bars, she says she told us where we were going when we went back to Vietnam. It was a secret. Nobody knew. My CO didn't know. His CO didn't know. But a girl in a bar knew.
Okay.
So when we went back aboard ship and headed and steaming, everything was corrected and we were steaming back to Vietnam, we had a secret briefing in the pilot's ready room, and the CO says, we're going to Quang Ngai province. Well, the girl in the bar knew that. How did she know that? If she knew that, the enemy knew that.
Totally.
The enemy knew we were coming. I didn't want to fly.
Yeah.
I felt like a clay pigeon sat on a fence post, right? They know I'm coming. They're shooting at me. I want to die.
Yeah.
I don't want to die.
Yeah.
I want to stay alive.
Yeah, totally.
So it just happened that two guys who were with the battalion we were working with, the infantry, the two forward air controllers who were assigned to the battalion went into the village with the girls in the bars and disappeared and never came back.
Really?
So where they went, who knows? Maybe they were sick. Maybe they got kidnapped. Maybe they died. Maybe they deserted. Who knows?
Yeah.
But the battalion was short two forward air controllers, so they asked for volunteers. So a good friend of mine named Jerry and I both volunteered to go out in the field with the battalion to be the forward air controllers for the battalion because these other guys were gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I was out on the ground for 13 days as a grunt. And it was a really interesting experience. I almost died 6 times in 13 days. And some very, very close calls. So after that, I said, okay, I guess I better go back to flying. I think flying is safer than being on the ground.
Can you give us like a day-to-day of what happened when you're on the ground?
Well, we would go out patrolling and looking for the enemy to destroy him and capture him and defeat his purpose, whatever. And sometimes we would be shot at. Mm-hmm. So when we saw we were getting shot at and people started getting down on the ground so they wouldn't get hit, then the aircraft controllers, the F-4 air controllers like myself, would call in the fighter bombers to drop bombs on the sniper that was shooting at us. So they did that and obliterated the poor bird. But in the meantime, the bombs fell short and landed among our people. So several Marines were badly wounded. So then I had to call in the helicopters to take away the wounded guys. And I did a really silly thing, and it was funny at the same time and really scary at the same time. When the helicopters were coming in, they were my squadron. So I was hot dogging it for my buddies. And I was out in the middle of the highway waving the helicopters down to land on the highway. And just as a joke, when the first helicopter landed down, just to be a John Wayne lookalike, I jumped in the ditch and hunkered down. Well, about the time I hit the ditch, a series of bullets came right through where I had been standing and punctured the nose of the helicopter that I had just waved in. And so that was one of the close calls that I had.
What would you call that?
A close call or what?
A close call.
Yeah. And so the major who was flying the helicopter got really mad at me because he thought I did that on purpose, but I didn't. So and I explained to him later, I didn't know they weren't shooting at us here where I had you land. They were shooting at the guys way over there. And we had a similar occasion where we were taking fire and that's being shot at. And we called in some artillery. There was another guy who was the artillery observer, and his job was to call the artillery from various places. He could call it off of artillery bases nearby or ships that were offshore. They could bring in naval gunfire. They could blow the heck out of stuff. And we could also call in gunships and bombers, and it was evil.
How do you because you're in a jungle, and most of the jungle looks the same. So how do you say? And clearly it doesn't work that well because you bombed some of your teammates. Like, how do you tell a helicopter bomb those group of trees versus those group of trees?
Well, we weren't in the jungle, actually. We were more out in the rice paddies with rows of trees between the rice paddies. It was pretty open.
Okay.
And so then the way we communicated with people in the air was called a smoke grenade. They came. They put out a very dense cloud of brightly colored smoke of different colors. You can have red, green, yellow, purple, white. I'm not sure if there's any more colors. Green, did I say green? And so we would throw a smoke grenade, and then anybody could see that because it would make this huge cloud of very dense color.
Of course.
So then it was great for helicopters because when the helicopters were coming in, they needed that because they could see where you were, and the way the smoke blew would give the helicopters the idea of which direction the wind is blowing.
Okay.
So very important to land into the wind in any aircraft. And so when the fighter bombers came in, we could do that too. We could throw out a smoke grenade and say, okay, 200 yards to the west by that tree or by that house or whatever. And they were pretty accurate. It's just the thing with the artillery was when they always fire one round to see if they got the range. And so they did. They fire a test round. And then we say, okay, add 100 yards. Well, in that particular case, they heard cut 100 yards instead of add 100 yards. So they dropped the next salvo 100 yards closer to us, actually into our guys. So some Marines got wounded. As far as I know, nobody got killed on either one of these events, but it was enough to call in the medevac helicopters.
How badly wounded?
I don't know.
No,
I don't know. I wasn't there actually when they loaded them. So.
And you never got wounded or anything?
I got one teeny tiny. I got the smallest wound in all of the history of Vietnam.
Okay, what was that?
We were in this little place called Dong Ha, which is way up at the north side of South Vietnam. And we had this village that was our squad, and we had lots of tents and maintenance bays and buildings for our operation. And one night, in the middle of the night, while I was sleeping soundly, I had heard there's this distinct difference between incoming artillery and outgoing artillery. We had artillery guns near us that were constantly shooting out, boom, 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 all night long.
How come?
That's another story. It's called harassment and interdiction fire.
Okay.
So they would go out during the day and recon the area and figure out where the trails crossed. Okay, so they figure, okay, the enemy's going to be using these trails at night, so we'll just drop an occasional random round on this trail and harass and indict them.
Okay.
Stupid, terrible waste. But they did that. But the incoming round sounds entirely different. I had never heard an incoming round before, but I recognized it in a deep sleep as an incoming round. And I yelled to my buddies. I had 7 roommates in this big tent. I say, hey, incoming, incoming. And I threw my mosquito netting aside, and I ran down the end of the hooch to the door. We had a bunker right outside the door. And I headed for the bunker.
Okay.
It was probably 30 feet away. And about the time I got out the door, I heard another incoming round, and it sounded like it was going to be very, very close. So I didn't want to take the risk of being above ground because when a rocket or a bomb explodes, it blows up, upwards. And the best place to be is on the ground or in a hole. So I hit the ground, hoping I would be safe. My buddy behind me was braver or stupider, I'm not sure which, maybe both, than me. He kept running, and he stepped on my foot. And I got a little piece of stone about the size of a grain of rice jammed up underneath my toenail.
Oh, wow.
And, it didn't bleed. But I knew it was really, we're living in the middle of rice paddies where buffalo have been pooping for, eons, not to mention whatever else. And I knew I could get an infection from this stone under my toenail. So I went to the doc, and he took 4 steps and he went flick. He took that little stone out and he painted my toe with mercurochrome. And that was the end of it. He picked up a clipboard and wrote my name down. And I said, Doc, if that's the Purple Heart list, take my name off. This is not a Purple Heart wound.
Yeah.
Wasn't directly inflicted by the enemy. And I didn't lose 1/10 of one Q-tip worth of blood.
Okay.
So I thought he did, so I ignored it. 6 months later, when I'm checking out to go home, I found out they awarded me a Purple Heart for that stupid little wound. Too late to refuse it. Yeah, I do. Too late to refuse it at that point. So, and sometime later back in the States, I had to stand at formation in an hour while they read off my citation and gave me this big hoorah about having a Purple Heart and being wounded by enemy action, blah, blah, blah. Such Bucky.
You can curse. It doesn't matter. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah.
Um, so what is courage to you?
Or, well, pressing on when you're afraid.
Uh huh.
Yeah, pressing on.
What's the most courageous thing you saw out in the Vietnam, or just in life in general?
Oh, gosh. I saw guys flying into landing zones to pick up wounded when bullets were passing through their helicopter and
Mm-hmm.
flying off and taking off and getting full of holes as they flew off. That didn't actually happen to me. I was very fortunate. I got shot at, and there were a time or two when we went into or out of a hot landing zone with our machine guns blazing,
Mm-hmm.
but for some reason we never took any hits.
Hmm.
But it was still exciting to know that you're shooting back.
Mm-hmm.
If you're shooting back, that means you're getting shot at, right?
That's true. That's true. Did you have any friends die that anyone you were close with? Like,
Yeah. We lost 8 pilots while I was there for 13 months.
what is that like? How is that? How do you
Um,
deal with that?
Well, at that point you just have to stuff it. You just stuff the fear, and you could be next, and you always know in the back of your mind it won't be you next, and you hope it won't be you next anyway. And you just stuff it and have a few beers and make a cheers and drink to the guy who died and just keep going. You can't stop. But I lost one pretty good friend. We'd become pretty close, and then my best friend through flight school was killed elsewhere. I wasn't flying in the same squadron with him, but he was flying in an H-34, and he actually had a mid-air collision with a Huey, and his airplane destroyed his blades, so he just fell out of the sky at night, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That was hard. That was a tough one. So, yeah, but just courage is just pressing on, even though you know it's scary.
What is it like to be, or actually, let me ask you this: how, like, since we're on the topic of courage, what makes you go on, right? Like, what makes you not betray what I was gonna say, what I was gonna ask you a second ago is what it's like to be a part of a group of guys, right? So close, so like on the edge of, just on the edge, that bonding you guys have with each other. What makes you not just desert, or what'd you call it? When you leave your platoon, you never see again.
I don't remember, just desert.
Deserted.
Well, it was a combination of things. Most of the guys, me excluded, a lot of us that were cadets, didn't go through boot camp. But in boot camp, or officers training, they really beat into loyalty and loving the Marine Corps. I mean, it's branded into your soul. It really is. So when you're out there, and I got it, it was infectious, because when I was out there, I was there for the Marines in the field. I wanted to give them all the support I could and bring them food and bring them water and bring them back to the hospital when they needed it. Yeah, so it just becomes duty, and you don't think about it. You just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you shut the fear back into a corner of your brain somewhere that has a little stainless steel lockbox with a key, with a lock with no key. So you stuff stuff in, but nothing comes out.
How do you do that? What are you got any techniques, like some meditation,
No, it certainly wasn't meditation. I think in my case I drank a lot.
Drank a
way
lot.
to excess almost every night. We had the bar and we could drink, and drinks were cheap. Beer was a quarter, mixed drinks were 35 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And we just went to the bar and got shit-faced every night.
Nice.
Yeah, it was. Of course, you had a hangover once in a while, but that's how we dealt with it. And then to sit in the bar and tell your story of that day, what happened to you that day, and to tell your friends and have them listen, it's really good therapy. And then to listen to their stories. So I'd sit in the bar and we'd tell all these stories. And I learned stuff in the bar that I used in combat.
Like what?
Okay. Sometimes the enemy, when I talked about how we would throw out a smoke, the enemy listened to our radios.
Mm-hmm.
So if we talked to a battalion commander or the forward air controller out with a platoon, he would say, okay, we're over here by the green smoke. So we knew roughly where he was, and we saw a green smoke, so we'd start to spiral down to the green smoke. Well, suddenly there's a second green smoke. which one is the real one, which one did the enemy put out.
Mm-hmm.
And the enemy listened and they did that. So we got to the point where we communicated with the grunts, and they would not say the color of the smoke as they threw it. They would throw a smoke, and then I would say, I have a green smoke. And then they'd say, yes. So then I know I would spiral down on that green smoke, or blue or red or yellow, whatever.
So they can't hear you. They can only hear the people on the ground?
No, the enemy could hear everything.
Okay.
They had radios from everything.
Okay.
You know, it's not that hard to jump frequencies and eavesdrop on stuff.
Uh-huh.
We didn't have encrypted radios at all. Sure days we probably do nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But so the guys would just go down and spiral in and land and throw out some food and water and pick up some wounded and go back to base.
I like the vision of that. That's funny. How are the movies today like versus what you've experienced? Because your story is different from the next Vietnam, veteran.
Well,
So-
I'm firmly convinced that every veteran of every war anywhere had his very own war.
Okay.
Everybody's experience was different.
Mhm.
I'm firmly convinced you could take twin brothers who went all the way through college together, went through officers training together, went through flight school together, put them in the same squadron flying together, and they still would each have a different war. Because
Why do you say that?
they would experience something different, and
Mhm.
they would experience it differently.
In your mind?
Internally, they
Yeah.
would internalize it differently than each other,
Mm-hmm.
even if they're identical twins. I'm sure they would.
What was your war after coming back into society? And correct me if I'm wrong, a majority, not a majority, but a bunch of people hating you for going to the war, right? With the hippie movement.
Okay,
Right.
now I missed that too.
Okay.
We're in Vietnam and back just as that was beginning to happen.
Oh, okay.
And I got out. So I never felt disrespected.
Mhm.
I came back and got out. I spent my 15 months down in Southern California training new guys to go to Vietnam. But I never really saw that anti-war.
How come you
Motion.
left so early?
I finished my obligation and I wanted out.
Okay.
I had, in those days, it was flight school plus 3 years.
Uh-huh.
And I did my flight school and I did my 3 years, and I did not want to go back to Vietnam.
How come?
I didn't want to go back to Vietnam because of the stupid, idiotic war that was going on.
So
I didn't want to die there.
Yeah, totally. Do you next to some mosquitoes and shit, right?
Yeah.
Did you I know this is kind of a stupid question, but
No,
I'm just
no.
curious. So do you at the time, not now, but at the time, did you hate the Vietnam people? Like, how would you feel towards the enemy, as you call it, right? How do you feel?
You know, we rarely saw the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
They shot at us from ambush and underground and all kinds of things. And the only time we really got upset was once in a while when one of my friends was killed.
Mm-hmm.
And damn guys, they need to die. But you know what? It was a war. We were killing them. They were killing us. And I never developed any great animosity for the people. I never also developed any great love for them either. But it's just indifferent. I guess you kind of have to be indifferent in that situation like that.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to not think, because if you keep thinking, then pretty soon you're going to be babbling idiot, and you want to go home.
Totally. It's like this person has a wife and kids, but he also has an AK in his hand. So what do you do?
Yeah.
What's your life after the war? Right, fresh out of the war. What's your life now after that?
Well, I got out of the service in late 1968, and I wanted to be an airline pilot.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1968, there was a severe recession going on. The airlines were furloughing pilots by the droves. I had one friend in my reserve squadron who was hired, trained, put online, and subsequently laid off by 3 different airlines in a row. TWA, Pan Am, and I think United. I'm not sure of the third one.
Okay.
So there was no jobs for pilots. And a friend of mine decided to hire an employment agency who specialized in aviation. So we hired this company in Long Beach, California, to send out a resume worldwide. And I thought, that's a good idea. I'll do that. So I did that. I hired this company, and they sent out hundreds of resumes, and I got half a dozen rejections, and that was it. But I also got an application from this funny little company in Washington, D.C. called Air America, which is the air arm of the CIA.
Okay.
And I knew what it was. I'd seen them in Vietnam briefly, and I did not want to go back to the war, but I really loved flying, and I really was getting desperate because I had worked for months. We're talking October now, a year later almost. After I got out, I got this telegram. In the meantime, a friend of mine had gone, and we had been corresponding. And he kept saying, Bill, this is really a good deal. And it's a lot safer, and it pays a whole lot better than Vietnam, than the Marine Corps. So come on over. So he convinced me to come on over. So I applied, and I got hired, and I was over there, and I started in June of 1970, flying flying out of northern Thailand, but working all over Laos. Little teeny, cutesy little country of Laos, kind of about the size of California, but had half a dozen provinces, I guess, and went all the way from the highland jungles all the way down to rice paddy type terrain, like Vietnam. And so Vietnam, Air America was just the grand adventure, written by book. My second book is called The C.I.A. Super Pilot Spills the Beans.
Spills the beans. Let's hear it. Spill some beans.
Here's some beans. Here's my bookmark.
Okay.
Well, here's one for the first book. And so while we were there, a correspondent named Ann Darling came and hung around with the guys, trying to pump us for information because it was secret CIA shit, right? So she wanted to find out what was going on.
Yeah. And
the guys just pumped her full of beans. We really did.
Okay.
And she went home and wrote an article called CIA Super Pilots Spill the Beans. And that article was published in the We, O-U-I, magazine. The very first premier issue of We magazine published her article. And in September of 72, I believe. And so it was that article I took off from that name of that article to use that to name my book. So
I like it.
But we kind of pumped her full of beans. And the article, I have the article, and I have the whole magazine actually. And I can read the article, and I wasn't there for this caper. All my friends were with her, drinking with her, and who knows, somebody probably seduced her or vice versa. But nobody ever fessed up. But I can read the article, and I can say, I know Dick said that, Gary said that, what's his name said that, and so just from what they were saying, I could tell who said what. So it was fun, and then most of it was just pure baloney.
Okay.
They fed her just full of baloney.
Like what?
Oh, just like one of the guys said, all the older pilots have been around here forever, and they've gone downtown. They've married a bunch of ex-prostitutes, and that's all the other guys' wives. That was not a nice thing to say, but it's in the article and things like that. So,
can you give us, for my podcast listeners, some beans that you've spilt on?
Well, I don't divulge any national secrets.
Of course, don't want to get a target on the back.
But the whole country of Laos was butted the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Everybody sort of knows what the Ho Chi Minh Trail was. The North Vietnamese were pushing down through the east edge of Laos to run supplies down to the Viet Cong in Vietnam. And so they encroached well into Laos. And they displaced 300,000 civilians.
Oh, wow.
And these civilians were almost right off the cover of National Geographic. They wore black silk pajamas. They had conical bamboo hats they wove themselves. They had machetes and pots. That's about all the steel they had. They somehow managed to make their own one-shot Damascus-style wrapped barrel, one-shot flintlock rifles, which they, just like a flintlock, they had to put powder down a barrel, pull back the thing, and let the flint strike the steel and make a spark. But it was only one shot, and a bullet was, I think, maybe a .22. I have one of these. I'll show it to you if you'd like.
Okay.
and they could make their own rifles.
Wow.
And so all these people were very, very primitive, but they didn't want to be, if they stayed where they were near the Ho Chi Minh Trail, they would either be enslaved and forced to work and carry stuff up and down the trail, or they'd be killed.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't want to be killed or enslaved. And they hated, the Laos people hate communism. So they headed west into the mountains, and that part of Laos is very hilly and jungle-covered hills. And they did what they called slash and burn agriculture. Every year they would go out to find a hillside somewhere, and they would use their machetes to cut down the trees. They would let the trees and branches lay there for a year until they dried out. Then they would burn them. And that ash would fertilize the soil. So the second or third year, then they would go plant rice there, dry rice. They didn't need water. And they would plant rice on the hillsides, and that would be their rice crop. And they could do that for 3 or 4 years, but then the nutrition was gone from the soil. So they had to be constantly moving on and constantly slashing and burning another patch for future years. So there's a certain time of year in Laos when all these thousands of tribes people are doing their slash and burn agriculture, where it's smoky season, like the worst smoke you've ever seen here. Like if you look at when we have fires and you look online to see the quality of the smoke when we're purple here, that's what it was like there for about 6 weeks during the season. I forget what time of year that was. That's just what happened. And when I lived in Udorn, a lot of the Air Force pilots used to take off from Udorn to fly over Laos to bomb in North Vietnam. And we asked those guys one day, well, how high do you get? How high do you have to get before you get out of the smoke? And they said, we don't.
We don't.
They go up 25, 30 feet, 30,000 feet, and they don't get out of the smoke.
That's crazy.
It's that bad. Yeah.
Wow.
So, just something we had to deal with.
What do you... continue.
But the people were very primitive, and they just needed food and supplies. So we'd carry them tons and tons of rice and canned goods, and some people would donate canned goods, so we'd take the canned goods out, and they'd canned milk and canned fish and whatever somebody would donate.
So was the government making you go do this?
Well...
Or the CIA?
It was the C.I.A. It was called Air America, which was supposed to be a private company, but it was funded by the CIA, funded by the government. And a friend of mine wrote a book called Honor Denied. Alan Cates wrote Honor Denied. And he's gone back through the archives and tracked back through myriads of convoluted and twisted and windy bureaucratic systems to find out that Air America really was not a private company. It actually was part of the United States. CIA. So that has had some repercussions since, because a lot of the guys who worked for the CIA at that time were retired military. If they were still working for the government, they were still accruing credits for retirement. They've been denied that, even still up to now. It's in Congress. It's been working its way through Congress for decades.
Yeah, of course.
And they've stalled. And most of those older guys who were World War II vets and even Korea vets, they've all died by now. Their families will get some pittance probably eventually, but you're only talking a few $1 million at the very most. For guys who put their life on the line for years, some of the guys were with Air America for 13, 14, 15 years.
What about you? Are you involved in any of that?
No, I don't have a dog in that fight, as they say. I was only with the Air America for 30 months.
Okay.
I had my fill of that and bailed. I had a habit of doing that. I was suffering from a bad case of post-traumatic stress. I finally figured out. So,
well, can you share what was that like?
Well, I just got in a couple of really dicey situations that scared the ever-living hell out of me, and kind of shut down all emotional response. And I was basically numb all the way down to the bottom of my soul, and I could not feel, and I could not talk, and I could not explain. So whenever I came to any kind of a confrontation, I just had to get away. So I quit jobs. I'd get fired, or I'd just not go to work the next day, something like that. And it bothered me for years. I finally found counseling. Be free, for those who are listening. The VA has free counseling. It's not the greatest counseling ever, but it's good counseling, and the price is right. And I got into the group therapy group in Roanoke Park, California. I went to that for years. Even after I came up here, I've been going to group therapy in Coeur d'Alene every month for 12, 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
Just last year early, or maybe the year before, it got canceled on us. Our therapist moved away to Vermont, and they didn't replace him. But I've had enough therapy that I recognize what's going on. I know how to handle it now, so it doesn't bother me much anymore at all.
What's some of the triggers you would recognize?
Well, any kind of confrontation.
Okay.
Just anybody says a cross word to me, I take it as a personal attack. So I either have to, I trigger right immediately into the fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a fighter, so I fly.
Mm-hmm.
I run away. That's how I've always been all
Fair
my
enough.
life until recently. So
Mm-hmm.
I still don't fight, but at least now I learned how to talk about it instead of running away.
What does your PTSD come from? It's kind of a basic question, but
Okay, I have two really. Can we hold pause while I get some water?
of course.
There were two major incidents that happened to me in Vietnam that created the post-traumatic stress.
Mm-hmm.
The first one was I'd only been in Vietnam about a month. I was a brand new guy. I had not flown at night before. I had not been out into where the heavy combat was going on. I had not been out into the mountains. But I was flying for a very senior pilot who had been there 8 or 9 months and really knew what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was flying his co-pilot. And we were launched out in the middle of the night. Actually, it was about 10 o'clock at night, I think. But it was very dark. I checked the lunar calendar, and the moon had not yet come up, so it was really dark.
Mm-hmm.
In Vietnam, there are no lights.
Mm-hmm.
There's no street lights. There's no city lights. There's no fires. There's no campfires. There's nothing. It's dark out
Mm-hmm.
there. And so we went out to this area, and we had a radio navigation device called TACAN, T-A-C-A-N. And the TACAN would give us our distance and our radial on our compass heading from our base. So we were told to go out 12.5 miles on radial 305, say, and that's where these Marines were, and they needed some help. And they had a man who was dying who needed to be rescued. He had been wounded. So we flew out to the area, and we changed radio frequencies. We're talking to the grunts on the ground, and the guy who's talking to us on the radio is breathing heavily,
Mm-hmm.
and you can tell he's exerting himself, and there's gunfire in the background. We can hear shots. While he's talking on the radio, we hear shots coming through his radio. So we know this is not going to be a piece of cake. So we fly on down, and we get overhead, and we can see where the landing zone is, except there is no landing zone. We're going to have to hover over tall trees and put down our hoist with the basket like you see them doing rescues out at sea, say.
Mm-hmm.
So we flew down, and as we flew down, I turned off all the lights so we were dark, and we didn't have any flashing lights or any lights at all. So the enemy couldn't see us, theoretically. And while we're going down, I can see it's just like a plane, a geometric plane, a flat surface filled with fiery dots. And these are called tracer bullets. Some bullets are dipped in phosphorus. And when you shoot them, it makes a burning streak through the sky so you can see where it's going.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see it coming. So the enemy had some kind of dye in theirs that made their phosphorus traces green. And the Marine Corps bullets had red. So like this crisscrossing field of jet streams below us, of bullets crisscrossing, and the enemies are green and the Marines are red, and they're making fans of fire towards each other, and so that defined the ground. That's how we knew where the ground was. And once in a while, we see an occasional burst go up, and one came really close to us, but it didn't hit us. And so we go down. We're hovering over this, and the Marines, I think, put out a thermite grenade, which makes a really bright, fiery white light temporarily. So, and they probably put it in a foxhole. I'm on the left side. I can't really see what's happening on the right side looking down. The pilot is on the right side. He can see while he's hovering. He can see what's happening down there. All I can see is the instrument panel, and my job is to watch the gauges to make sure the pilot doesn't do harm to the engine and that the engine's holding together. So we go down and we're hovering over the trees, and the trees are about 90 feet high. But because it was a hillside, the geometric plane that we're trying to hover over is tilted. You can't hover over something at a tilt. You've got to be balanced and be hovering vertically to gravity. So the pilot keeps getting distracted by the geometric plane under us, and he keeps drifting off. And that's endangering our mission because we can't get the basket down to the Marine. And if we did, then we have to keep it there until he gets in, until someone puts him in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have to pull him up through the trees, and it's pretty much got to come straight up, or we're going to drag him through the trees. Maybe get hung up, get the basket and the cables hung up in the trees, which would not be any good. So the guy can't see. It's really hard for him to hold the hover. So he says to me, "Bill, do you know where the hover floodlight switch is?" And my first instantaneous thought was, this is really a stupid time to give me a quiz on what's going on in the helicopter. And then I realized, oh no, oh shit, he's going to have me turn those lights on. We're hovering over a big battle. There's maybe 8 million enemy below us, and they want to kill us. And he wants me to turn on the external floodlights?
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit, I'm going to die. I'm going to die right here, right now. And that's exactly my thought.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, my thought was, I'm dead, but I'll do what I'm told to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Marine, death before dishonor, right? So when he said turn on the light, I hit that switch, and man, we lit up the countryside like you would not believe. That gave him the light he needed to hold a stable hover. We were able to winch up the Marine, get him in the helicopter, and nobody shot at us. It was totally amazing. I don't know why we didn't get shot full of a million holes, but we didn't. Maybe all the enemy knew also that if they shot, they would get shot by us, or the Marines could see them shooting. So anyway, everybody just threw himself down and hid out because of the light. So I turned off the lights, and we flew away and took that Marine to the hospital. We never got any feedback if he lived or died, so I have no idea. But we put our lives on the line, 4 of us. So there was a pilot, co-pilot, a crew chief, and a gunner on the helicopter, maybe a corpsman, probably a corpsman. So there are 5 of us on board.
Mm-hmm. And you leave your Marines, all the other Marines there too, to defend for themselves.
Yeah, and they were exposed when we turned on our light too.
Yeah.
But everybody, my guess is just everybody said, "Holy shit, light," and threw himself down into a hole, onto the ground, behind a stump, behind a tree, whatever. And none of the enemy had enough smarts to think, "Oh, look, I'll shoot at the light."
Yeah,
It
right.
filled us full of holes. One burst of AK-47 would have just blown us out of the sky. So that scared I basically at that point, I felt like I died.
Mm-hmm.
I was a dead man. I am a dead man from that point on. And my whole world has just ended. There's nothing left, no life left. And about a month later, a very similar situation, same area. Marines are surrounded, Marines getting the shit shot out of them. And they need an emergency medevac to take someone out who's been wounded. So I go out. Again, I'm co-pilot for a senior major this time, actually a senior captain this time, who became major soon, Major Jantz. And we go out to the same area, and we hear the same report on the radio. They say a different guy, probably, but he's exerting himself. He's breathing heavy. We can hear shooting in the background. We know this is grim. But we're gonna, and again, it's night. But we're gonna try to pick up a wounded Marine. I don't know if he's in a landing zone, or if we're gonna have to hover again. Flying co-pilot for the captain, we were the command and control ship. So the other helicopter was going to go actually down and make the landing and do the rescue. We were there to back him up should he get in trouble. So theoretically, we weren't even going to go down to the ground. So I felt happy about that.
Mm.
So we flew out to the area, and we talked to the guy on the ground, and he said, major understatement, he says, "Well, we're not ready yet. Hold for a while." Well, they were getting overrun. The enemy was coming through their perimeter, and it was devolving down to hand-to-hand combat, and it was getting really nasty. So unknown to us, the Marines on the ground called in artillery on their own position.
Mm.
Because you know you're going to die anyway. You know the artillery's coming. You can get in a foxhole. You might survive. But you've got to blow. If you don't blow the enemy away, he's going to kill you all anyway. So the Marines called in artillery on their own position. I mean, that's a really desperate thing to do.
Totally.
Sad, awful, disgusting, desperate thing to do. But nobody told us. So in the meantime, we're told to hold. So we're holding. We're just driving around, making a great big circle in the sky, kind of halfway between the battle and our base. But nobody told us, because when we go out there, every time we went out there, there's a certain disembodied voice in the ethers, and his name was Landshark Charlie. And Landshark Charlie was in charge of the artillery. And the first time, the previous story, when we went out, we told Landshark, shut off the artillery. And he did. Until we got back, we tell him we're done. He resumed artillery. This time, we told Landshark to shut off the artillery, and he did. But because the Marines were being overrun, they had an emergency request for artillery. And either we were on the wrong frequency and we didn't hear the call, or nobody bothered to tell us. It was a miscommunication. So we're flying around halfway between our base and the battle at exactly the altitude that the big howitzer shells are passing through. So we're flying along, and suddenly there's this humongous, violent shaking of the helicopter, turbulence, just, and I'm just shaking the fillings out of my teeth. And I'm saying, what the hell is that? And my captain is saying the same thing. And then as soon as the shaking, about the time the shaking stopped, then there was a tremendous noise. Think of being under a railroad trestle when a high-speed freight train goes over with your head right up by the track. Just, it's hard to describe the noise. Just terrifically loud. And then, by the time the turbulence and the noise stopped, it was replaced by this really, really bright light coming off to my left. And I looked out, and I saw our second helicopter was burning. It had been hit by an artillery shell. It blew up, and it was burning and falling out of the sky. I could see it. It was just slowing down and going low and slowing down and falling and burning, really bright. These helicopters are made out of magnesium. Once they start, they're fireworks, basically. When you see fireworks, they're bright, that's magnesium. Okay? So the helicopter's made out of fireworks.
Yeah, totally.
It's an aluminum alloy, and it's really hard to ignite, but once it ignites, and we were carrying our tanks full of the most powerful aviation gasoline you can buy, and it's called purple, and it burns really hot. So once the fuel started burning, and probably what happened is, putting the pieces together later, probably what happened is the artillery run did not explode when it hit the helicopter. It just passed through, but it ripped everything apart. The guys behind, there were gunships following, and they said they thought the artillery round went right through the cockpit. So the two pilots died instantly. And then the artillery shell ripped fuel lines and electric lines, and then poof, you got hot fire. Hot fire ignites magnesium. Magnesium burns. The entire helicopter burned to nothing in 10 seconds with 5 guys on board.
Wow.
Poof, 5 guys incinerated to death instantly. Friends of mine. Oh, that was traumatic. Okay, so that's the second traumatic incident in 30 days.
Yeah, I can understand the PTSD for sure. So let's get into a little bit more of the deep, I guess, not deep, but just like big thought thinking here is, how come you survived? Like, I don't know what you believe this all is, and we'll get to that, but if you're religious or atheist or whatever, but how come you got to survive but not your friends in the helicopter?
It's a very good question, and there's just a toss of the dice or a roll of the dice or a whim of fate, who knows. It wasn't skill. It was just, I like to call it shithouse luck. Just
shithouse luck.
Yeah. I mean, we got the good hand and someone else got the bad hand, and that's just how it is sometimes. I mean, some of the best pilots I knew died in Vietnam, and some of the worst pilots grew up to be airline pilots.
Hmm.
Scary thought, isn't it?
That is a scary thought. What did you what did you what did you think to yourself after Vietnam, and thinking about, like, did you like feel guilty that you were the one that survived?
There is that thing called survivor guilt,
Uh-huh.
survival guilt. I didn't really feel that. I would just I was in kind of a mental haze for actually decades after Vietnam because I just reacted and ran away to a new job every time something got stressful for me. So um, I didn't recognize it till 1997,
Mhm.
90, 97, 94. Finally, I recognized because I didn't know what post-traumatic stress was in 94. So 27 years after these two major incidences, 28 years actually, I found out about post-traumatic stress and I got into the group therapy I talked about.
Mhm. What is group therapy like? How has it helped you?
Well, what helps is you realize that you're not the only one.
Mhm.
As I said earlier, everybody has his own war, everybody has their own experience. But the traumatic experiences, your reaction is pretty much always the same for everybody. You shut down, you withdraw, you're scared, and you don't want anything to trigger those memories like loud noises. A lot of Vietnam vets, if they hear a car backfire, you'll find them on the ground because they think they're getting shot at. And even
Mhm.
though it's been 50 years since Vietnam, they suddenly just throw themselves down. It's automatic. You don't think about it. I couldn't do that because I was sitting in the cockpit.
Mhm.
I was strapped in, and I had my hands on the controls. I was in control, theoretically.
Yeah,
But
totally.
those times I wasn't flying, I was not in control. That was scary. So, yeah, survival guilt, and just there's a whole litany of things that are the symptoms of post traumatic stress. And I probably have had them all at one time or other. So,
Well, Vietnam is, not your whole life, right? That
mm.
was only your 20s per se. What else? What have you been up to since then?
Well, like I said earlier, after I got out of the Marine Corps, I actually spent a whole summer in Alaska, my first year out of the Marine Corps.
Beautiful spot. Good place to go.
60, yeah, most of 69.
Mhm.
Flying an old World War II series helicopter
Oh, okay.
that was refitted for civilian life and working all over the North Slope when they were doing the oil exploration for getting ready for the oil bids. And then all
Mhm.
the oil companies bid on the tracks. And then they started drilling, and that's where all the oil came from for the big oil pipeline and Valdez and the Valdez incident and all that stuff. So all the oil came from, and I was involved in the initial phase of that, flying people all around the North Slope to do surveying and supporting drill rigs.
Mhm.
So it was interesting work, and it was easy, and it paid a lot better than what it paid twice as much as I'd been making in the Marine Corps. So I was happy.
Mhm.
And then I had an interesting project when I finished the North Slope. The boss asked me if I'd like to go someplace. By the time I left the North Slope, it was snowing and cold. It's 24 hours daylight in June and July,
Mhm.
but I didn't leave till October, and it was cold and snowy and blizzardy. So my boss asked me how I'd like to go to someplace further west than Seattle, no, further west than Hawaii and further south than Seattle. I said, oh, that sounds warm. I'll go. And he said, well, I'm lying about the south part. It's actually a little north. So he told me I'm Chitka.
Mhm.
I said, well, okay, so where's that? I didn't know where that was. He says, oh, the Aleutian chain. Sent me way out to the end of the Aleutian chain, where in those days, the early days of underground atomic testing,
Mhm.
countries had been doing atmospheric testing for a decade or two and had managed to fill the atmosphere up with a lot of atomic particles, and it was harmful to people. So finally just said, okay, we've got to stop doing it. So we had an international treaty. We all agreed to stop doing atmospheric testing. Now they're doing underground testing. So I was out in this island, which is basically a mountaintop underwater, sticking out from under a mountain underwater. And they drilled down into 4,000 feet down, drilled a hole 10 feet diameter, put an atomic bomb down there, and filled the hole with cement and set the bomb off
Mhm.
for testing. So I was sent out there for that. And my job was to support biologists. I had the the old, like I said, same old helicopter I had on the North Slope, actually. And I just flew biologists around, and he had a big old Hasselblad camera, and they would take pictures with a non-glare lens. And we flew around the coast, around the whole perimeter of the island, and they took pictures of the water at the shore, because in the pictures, without the glare, they could see the sea otters. And they counted all the sea otters. So they counted all the sea otters before the blast, and they counted them again after the blast to see if any died. And as far as I know, only one died, and that was one that was in a pen near ground zero, but they said it died of natural causes. So we counted birds and we counted fish, and just it was kind of fun. It was really
cool.
Pristine, very isolated, very windswept. We saw the sun about 3 hours in 3 weeks. The rest of the time it was cold and foggy and windy.
Huh. Did you see the bomb?
In a way.
Uh-huh.
It was underground, 4,000 feet underground. And we were 20 miles away, underground, in a bunker. But we had a TV camera focused on ground zero. So we could see whatever. And so they counted down 10, 9, 8, 7, all that jazz, and got down to zero and set it off. And we were 20 miles away, so it took a few seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was just a mild earthquake, a little rumbling and rolling of the bunker. And the light was one of those hang-down lights that kind of swung a little bit.
Yeah.
The TV camera shook and then went dead, so we really saw nothing.
Yeah.
Because it was destroyed, I guess, by probably just knocked over because the blast didn't break the surface. Was meant to not. So that was anticlimactic, actually, because... And then an hour later, I'm hovering over ground zero with the scientists with Geiger counters, making sure that none of the radiation broke surface. Think how stupid that was, because what if the radiation had broken the surface?
Yeah, right.
Would have been toasted.
Yeah, totally. That is stupid.
But they thought they would know, and they were scientists, and I trusted them. So like I said, I tried to be an engineer, so I have a lot of science background, and I love science, and I trust science.
So let me ask you the podcast questions, okay?
Yeah, sure.
Why is there birth? How come it leads to death? And what's the point of the stuff in between?
You got me.
Got you?
Yeah. I think the meaning of everything is love.
Okay.
I really do.
Did you go to Woodstock?
I did not. In fact, I was up at the North Slope of Alaska during Woodstock. Far back, can't get much further and still be in the USA. I would have loved to have. But I didn't even know about it till actually years later. Okay. And I think, we're meant to be on this earth to get along and love each other. And why don't we? It's too many stupid things getting away.
Totally. What do you think's afterlife?
Well, I want to hope that there's another life or another existence somewhere of some kind. What's the old Satchmo song? I doubt there's heaven, but I pray there is no hell. Something like that.
That makes sense. I like that. Do you fear death?
No, I've been too close to death too many times to know that it's not going to punch my number one day soon. Hopefully I get another 10 or 15, 20 years even, but who knows? It could happen to anybody, even you.
Of course.
Young people fall over dead every day.
Yeah.
How old are you?
20.
20? Okay.
How old are you?
I'll be 78 next month.
What's that like? How does it feel?
Well, just 20 over again, just little creaky, few creaky joints and a little more weight on the frame, but basically I'm in good health. And my wife and I make it a point to stay in good health. We eat healthy and we eat organic and we don't drink and we don't smoke and we don't chew and all those other nasty things that people do to themselves. So, I expect to be around a few more years.
What do you think deja vu is?
Deja vu? Wow, that's a good one. There's definitely some psychic stuff. And I've had some flashes of it now and then.
Like what? I can't think of any off the top of my head, so I won't blame you if you can't either.
Well, no, I'll give you the best example that I have.
Okay.
And it's not even deja vu, actually, but it was definitely a psychic experience. After flying for a few years, I decided I should stop flying because all my friends were getting killed. I was traveling all over the world. I was not getting any money set aside. And a friend suggested that I go to chiropractic college.
Okay.
So another symptom of post-traumatic stress, I instantly, spontaneously decided I would become a chiropractor. So I went back to school for 12 quarters in East Bay, South Bay of San Francisco area, San Lorenzo, Hayward area. And I studied hard. I got through with a B average. When I finished, I graduated, and then I got ready for my state boards.
Okay.
And state boards are hard, and they like to fail about half the people. And I wanted to pass because I needed to make a living.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been in school for 4 years, so counting all the prep and training and everything. So I took my boards, and I was doing well. I was doing very well. And the advantage we had, I took a prep course. I paid for a high-powered prep course.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the courses, what people had done is every year they had studied, they had people go take the boards and to come back and report what happened to them. So the prep school had a pattern. They could see this pattern every year, that at this hour they asked this question, at this hour they asked this question, and this people got this question. So by the time it came down to my question, my turn to go take my board, I knew what my question was going to be. I had to be an expert on Paget's disease.
Okay.
Okay, I can tell you a lot about Paget's disease.
Uh-huh.
But
I have no idea what that is, so share.
it's a bone cancer.
Okay.
So there's a primary diagnosis, there's a secondary diagnosis, and there's a tertiary diagnosis. And the tertiary diagnosis can be either A or B. And so I had this young lady, she was a chiropractor, and she was doing my test. And we got down to the point where she said, okay, I got through the primary diagnosis and the secondary diagnosis, and I aced it. And I got down to the tertiary diagnosis, and I went the wrong way. I should have been A, and I said B. And they're recording these, okay? But they're not videoing them. They're only tape recording them. She waved her finger side to side to give me the notice that I'd picked the wrong direction. So I said, oh, wait a minute, let me rethink that, and I went the right way with it. So I aced it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a clipboard, and she was scoring me. And I saw her write down a failing grade.
Aw.
I had aced this test,
Yeah.
and she wrote down a failing grade.
Uh-huh.
I was so incredibly goddamn pissed off that somewhere behind me, I felt this flood, this lightning bolt of energy came through the back of my head, through the front of my head, and went
Uh-huh.
into her. And the message I carried, it carried that message. It wasn't my message. It was the message of the psychic message from somewhere. And the message was, change that number, you bitch. And goddamn, she picked up the clipboard and changed the number, and I passed.
That's crazy. What do you think that is? Divine intervention?
I think it was intention. My intention was so hard,
Yeah.
so fine, so demanding to ace that test and get my license. That probably came from me, but it worked.
Totally. I totally believe in intention and intuition 100%. The law of manifesting things,
Yeah,
and attraction.
So that was the most bizarre thing I've ever felt. And then I got my license, and then I practiced about 3 years, and I went back to helicopter flying.
I was going to say.
I couldn't stand being in an office. I couldn't stand dealing with sick people. I couldn't stand doing all the paperwork. I hate insurance companies. And I kept looking out the window to see what's going out there, what's going on up there.
Totally.
Looking up out the window, say,
Totally.
oh, there's an airplane way up there. I want to be in it. So I got another
Uh-huh.
flying job and went back to flying.
I think I don't like God. I don't like using the word God because that's so broad, and I'm not necessarily a Christian, so I use the word the divine, right? So I like the divine, and the divine told you that. I was like, you know what? You've been trying so hard, and you won't take any of the signs I've been telling you. So guess what, motherfucker? Here you go. Here's your license. See how it goes for you. And then you found out, you're like, damn, I need to be up in the sky.
Yeah, that was. But the fun part at that point was I got hired to go to Kwajalein, which is in the Marshall Islands, and it's the world's largest atoll, and it's shaped like a reverse Florida. So instead of going off to the left, it goes off to the right. and it's dotted by probably 100 islands of different sizes around the edge of the atoll. And the U.S. government has leased that from the Marshallese government for testing, the Star Wars testing, the anti-missile testing system. We're trying to perfect bigger and better ways to kill everybody on the Earth.
Huh.
So when they launch a missile out of Vandenberg out of Hawaii, it goes up into space and it goes around and it comes down in Kwajalein Atoll.
Yeah.
So my job was to carry support troops to around all the various islands, because the islands all had radars and cameras that monitored the missiles. Missiles had no explosives. They were just telemetry. But when they came in from outer space, you could see them 100,000 feet up going into the lagoon. They come down in about 10 seconds.
Wow.
Scary. And sometimes you had the multiple entry warheads in that, so the one dot would break into several, like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And they'd be swirling and searching around each other, each one looking for its target. And see this thing coming out of the sky with all these tentacles of spiraling white missile tracks. Scary as hell. If you didn't know what it was. You ever see the movie War of the Worlds?
No.
No, that was way back, 38, I think, but it's really scary. And it looked like if I'd been out in a sailboat out there in the ocean and didn't know what that was, I would have thought, oh, War of the Worlds, Martians are invading.
Yes, I actually have. I know what that is. I haven't seen it, but I know what that is.
Yeah, everybody knows what it is.
Why do you think we want to? Why are we all trying to kill each other? Like I feel like most humans, not all, but most humans know that's like everything we do is like horrible for the planet. With like war will just lead to destruction. We're fucking up the ozone layer. We know all these things, but how come we just never do anything about it?
I really think it comes down to greed. I really do. Greed.
Okay.
People in charge of making munitions know that they can become extremely wealthy if they can sell fear.
Sell
fear.
Yes.
Fear. Be afraid. Be afraid of your neighbor. Be afraid of people of different color. Be afraid. And it's greed, and then they foster that greed among other people too. So
with that, what did you think of all of COVID? What's your opinion on COVID-19?
Well, as I said earlier, I believe in science. I really think it was a true threat. I think it still is, because it's the new variants are killing people left and right. I've been vaccinated, and I've just stopped being careful because it seems like I'm immune.
Okay.
My wife and a lot of other people, we actually having a social life again. We got together with friends. We love it. But there's a lot of people who haven't been vaccinated, and I just saw on Facebook that like 99+% of the people who are now hospitalized are those who've not been vaccinated. I grew up when smallpox was still a threat. I had a smallpox. Did you ever have a smallpox shot?
I think I had chickenpox, smallpox, same things, right?
Yeah.
I think I had that when I was a kid, so I never got a shot for it.
Okay, it's chickenpox, because smallpox is pretty much eradicated, I think, by the time you grew up. That's why you didn't have a smallpox vaccination.
I've gotten shots before. I just don't know what they were.
And I right now pertussis and smallpox and chickenpox and measles and at least 2 or 3 other things don't happen anymore. Polio was a real factor when I was a kid. I had kids in my grammar school class who couldn't walk because their legs were all shriveled up by polio.
Wow.
My wife lost a neighbor. She got sick on a Friday and died on a Monday, her own age, when she was 4, from polio. Now, polio is almost non-existent. So I believe in vaccinations. This whole new vaccination with for the COVID is a whole different kind of vaccination. It's a whole different science. But I believe science, and I look at what they did. And the best way to judge something, let me tell you this for sure, one of the great wisdom of all things that I've ever learned in my life, the best way to judge something is by results.
By results?
Yeah. Sometimes harsh, but always fair.
Why do you say that?
Because it might be awful. The results might look awful. But that's how you judge.
What are some examples of that? Or just like, not like the bad cases, just in general, like what has made you truly realize, like, if you want to know something, look at the results?
Just life. I mean, look at. I mean, as a pilot, I've probably seen observed personally a few and then read about hundreds of different aviation accidents.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'd like to read them in detail because if you learn what someone else did wrong, you know what to not do wrong.
That's
Okay,
true.
judging by results, this guy screwed up and he drove into a hillside. How do you avoid that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you don't fly in clouds, low
Yeah.
and fast.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I followed the remains of airplanes off mountaintops where people drove into mountaintops at high speed.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe in karma?
Oh, sort of. It seems a little woo-woo, but at the same time, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I feel like for you, I feel like you wouldn't believe in karma because, you had good guy Joe, lived a perfect life to help out his neighbors, goes to Vietnam, and then he dies. Why? He didn't
Well,
even hurt a puppy.
maybe he did something evil in a previous life, huh?
Uh-huh. That's true. That's true.
Or
You believe in
maybe
that?
maybe he's done with this life. He's done all he has to do. It's time to move on to another life.
I believe in that. I totally believe that you die once your purpose is fulfilled.
I believe in the Great Spirit. You mentioned you like universal love or something. I believe in the Native American Great Spirit kind of person,
Mm-hmm.
and he's in everything. I think he's in
Totally.
nature and rocks and trees and water and it.
I just think yeah, I totally agree. I love science too, so I'm not saying this, but I just think like we're just meat sacks gorillas on a rock in a vacuum.
Yeah,
No fucking way. That's just that's no way. No way to me at least. Like that's I don't I just believe there's just something going on. There's something going on. Like how come, we're born but then we get it taken away? Why?
yeah, yeah.
You got any aliens or ghost stories?
No, I don't.
Bigfoot or anything?
No Bigfoot. I've been out in the woods, way out in the woods,
Uh-huh.
and flying helicopters mostly. And I never saw anything that I would say would an alien or flying saucer or anything like that. I'm actually surprised. I probably should have seen something,
Yeah, right.
but I didn't. I'll share one good experience I had. It's sort of psychic. I meditate.
Mm-hmm.
I used to meditate very regularly, twice a day. And 1998, around in there, I was meditating heavily, and I was oming,
Yes.
and I was having a good time. And I kept having this vision of a record player, and it looked like a sombrero. The record part was the flat part of the hat, and then the center of the sombrero, it looked more like a sombrero than anything else I can describe. And the record had tracks on it, and the needle was doing what needles do.
Mm-hmm.
But on the center of the hat, there was one track that would go up the side of the sombrero to the top. And the needle kept trying to go up there and falling off, and trying to go up there and falling off, trying to go up there and falling off. Finally, it made it all the way to the top. When that needle hit the top, I saw the light.
The light.
The light.
The light?
The light.
What did it look like?
Just this incredibly breakthrough white flash that is almost beyond description.
Okay.
And that happened to me twice,
Uh-huh.
2 days in a row. I said, whoa, okay, now I get it.
Uh-huh.
So there's something there.
You just that overwhelming feeling of makes sense. Everything makes sense. We're gonna die and it's gonna be dope. I can't wait. Is that what you're talking about? I've
Yeah.
had that
Yeah,
before.
I just feel like that's the light that everybody's looking for.
Uh-huh.
Whether when you die, people say when they come back from nearly dying, they saw the light, this big bright tunnel.
Totally.
I didn't see a tunnel. I just saw this incredible, beautiful brightness. And people meditate. People meditate say they see that sometimes.
I have done psychedelic substances,
Aha.
and so I've had that experience. But I do meditate, and I have gone to a somewhat similar scenario what you're talking about. So I totally get it. But I've taken mushrooms, right, and had an experience of just everything's we're gonna like I said just a second ago. It's we're gonna die, and I can't wait. It's gonna be so cool. I know everything about the universe, and we're all good, guys.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I read an article in the Economist magazine. It's an old one I picked up at the library, the giveaway pile. But there happened to be an article in there about magic mushrooms.
Yep.
And I read it, and the author says, oh, how did he put it? Darn. Oh, it was like defragging your hard drive.
Defragging your hard drive.
And I'll tell you what, my hard drive is so scrambled and frittered and mixed up that I'm looking forward to someday trying this hard drive descrambler. And I actually got a hold of some magic mushrooms a little while ago, but I haven't tried them yet. So.
Oh. Well, I definitely recommend watching stuff on the internet, reading about it before you try it.
Yeah,
But
good.
What are you hoping to gain from it?
Oh, peace of mind, and I've
Uh-huh.
pretty much got peace of mind already. So, and maybe insight about what's life about and
Yeah.
what God is love. I'm sure that was another guided meditation I had once, and I'm firmly convinced that God is love. Love is God. That's it. It's that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Don't complicate it. I had a friend here in town. I don't know if you know Chris Moss.
I do not.
Right around the corner is Lisa V, artist.
Okay.
Her ex-husband. They got married and then they got divorced. But he had a dissecting aneurysm, which almost nobody ever survives.
Hmm.
It's where the lining of your blood vessels separate from the lining. And like
Ooh.
the blood vessel collapses inside and stops the flow of blood. He had that in his heart arteries.
Yikes.
And he's like the 1% who survived.
Uh-huh.
But he said he had a very similar.
What did he experience?
He can't explain it. He kept saying, it's so amazing, I can't explain it. And all he kept saying over and over is, enjoy the moment and live life. Enjoy the moment, live life. And it makes sense.
True.
Well, what else is there? What do we have just now?
Well, it's true. If you live in the past, you'll miss the present,
Yeah,
Always look into the future, miss the present. It's
Yeah,
all about the
yeah,
present for sure.
It is. Of course, you have to plan and shop for groceries and all that sort of stuff. But
Here's the quote that perfectly describes it for you, okay? It's life is not a race. If life were a race, the best music composers would play one note, the end note. Life is a dance. Where in dance you can choose your partner, choose your music, your dance moves, but there's no set in stone. You have to end here at this point right now. It's just you go to the flow of the music and you stop when you feel like it.
I like it.
I think that's very accurate.
Yeah, good.
What do you so this is actually no. What would you say to the younger generation?
Well, we've got to work together and stop letting other people divide us.
Oh, wow. I
No.
like that.
Listen to each other. Talk, not argue.
Mm.
Listen and discuss
Mm-hmm.
respectfully. Say, okay, what's your point of view? Well, my point of view is blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, I see your point of view. Here's my point of view. Okay, we're way apart. Well, guess what? This country was built on compromise. You're over here, I'm over here, down the middle. It's where we got to go. But I'm a little worried that it might be too late because what the climate is doing right now is frightening the hell out of me. I mean, this ongoing hot weather for weeks and weeks looks like it may continue on for weeks and weeks, maybe again next year. And that's going to create forest fires.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife is very allergic to smoke. We're going to have to leave the area. We're preparing to start to think about leaving the area. And we love it here. We absolutely love Sandpoint. We live at Seasons Resort right on the beach. We love that unit. Not if we can't live there, we can't live there. So we don't want to lock ourselves in the house and live with air conditioning and air filters on all the time and not be able to go anywhere.
Mm. Totally.
So it's real scary. And this hot weather it's killing people, lots of people. It's going to get worse. We've got to stop doing all the stuff we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of solar and windmills and whatever else we can do. I don't like nuclear power. I think nuclear power is stupid.
Why is that?
Oh, because the radiation involved. Look at Chernobyl. Look at that place in Japan that blew up. Look at 3 Mile Island, 1 Mile Island, whatever it was.
They're just sitting time bombs, you know?
Well, they're created by man. Mankind is not perfect. Mankind's build flaws. We can't continue to keep learning by our mistakes with nuclear power.
I like that. What do you think of the rise of technology?
Certainly good and bad. You know, I love my computer, but I could very easily throw it in the lake. So,
Mm-hmm.
and my phone is, I love my phone. I could very easily throw it in the lake. And they're bad, good and bad. So I basically take what I need and try not to get too frustrated with it.
What do you think of the younger generation when it comes to technology and overall just the state of us?
Well, it's a transition. It's a period of flux and change. I mean, look at my folks. They probably looked at phones and rock and roll and Elvis and all that stuff is weird and alien to them, and just life changes. I mean, just there's no stopping it. It's interesting to watch, but I'm getting further behind every day. There's an old famous Mark Twain quote. There's been a remarkable increase in a number of things I know nothing about.
That's good. I like that.
And that's been going on. Every day it gets worse.
What do you find most interesting?
Well, the fact that you can walk around with... You ever see that picture of all the things that are now on your phone? I mean, there's a typewriter and a library and an encyclopedia and a calculator and a camera and a photo album and probably 20 other things, a clock and an alarm and all those other things in that little bitty thing in your hand. There's more computer power in an old analog cell phone than there was on the first spaceship we shot out into the ethers that's gone forever and never coming back. Did you know in that one, as a representative of music, they did Chuck Berry's, one of Chuck Berry's songs. And that's the representative song we sent out into the universe on that space probe.
Yeah, it's supposed to represent loneliness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally know exactly what you're talking about.
I think it was Good Golly Miss Molly, or no, I forget what song it was, but it was a Chuck Berry song. It was recorded on that disc for someone out there in the ethers to find 8 million years from now and wonder who the hell wrote this.
It's pretty fitting though, you know, to send that song, because when you listen, like, it's supposed to represent loneliness when you send it out there in the loneliness of space, and then eventually, you know, hopefully something finds it and they listen to this being like, what the fuck is this? Throw it away.
We gotta find these people and destroy them.
Yeah, right. That's funny.
Wow.
What do you think of? So I might, if you know what this is, do you know what like Call of Duty is? Just like, you know, violent video games, right?
Oh yes,
you know,
I do.
Video games that take place in Vietnam, where I can click on it and start, you know, killing Vietnam people and doing Operation Tango, right? And 7-year-olds are getting a hold of this. What do you think of that?
Well, it's sad because we're training people to hate and to kill, and training them that to be totally indifferent to it. I mean, kids don't know the difference. If they were killing real people, they would know and they wouldn't care any different. And that's where a lot of, I think, our shootings are coming from, is that the kids just don't have any value of life and they've not been trained to be respectful. And then they get all wired up on some of these games or some podcast or some right-wing wacko or something, and they think, oh boy, looks like fun. Those kids in Colorado, they had fun shooting up all that. I could do better than that.
Totally.
That's really just awful. So we're never going to get all the guns out of the hands of everybody, so we just have to really start educating, and education is really not working.
Yeah. What do you think we should do then?
I don't know. That's above my pay grade, I think.
Above my pay grade.
I mean, to try to take all the guns from everybody certainly would not work. That would just create a big running gun battle all over the country.
Totally.
And so to try to educate them, but a lot of these right-wing people, they don't want to be educated. They don't want their kids to be educated about how harmful guns are. At least that's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I own guns. I'm shot expert with a pistol and a rifle in the service. I know how to shoot, but I don't carry. I don't feel the need to carry. I don't feel unsafe going downtown anywhere I go. Good God, I flew 43 months of combat
Yeah.
in
Right.
helicopters, and I carried weapons then, but I never had to use them. And I don't feel at all like anybody's going to. I mean, yeah, there's 1 in a million chance somebody's going to run downtown Sandpoint and shoot me as I walk down the street, but is that worth packing for? Would I have time to even return fire anyway?
Well, it's like, you know, that way, you know, like you said, 1 in a million chance that might happen. You're going to spend your whole life waiting for that to happen.
Or hoping it might.
Or hoping, yeah.
Ready
hoping
to
it
shoot,
might.
ready to
Because
shoot at any little person anytime where you think you might feel threatened.
totally,
No.
people want that. They want to kill people.
They do. Yeah. And then you see sometimes when there is a shootout,
Mm-hmm.
some bad person will start shooting. I just read in one of them last week where a good guy was shooting at the bad guy, and somebody thought the good guy was a bad guy, so he got shot dead.
Wow.
So, yeah, when you pull out your gun and start shooting, people are going to shoot back at you regardless.
Mm-hmm.
So, not a good idea.
I just think it's very gross that there's, like I said, like 7-year-olds, and like they get off school, they come home and they play Vietnam Killer 9000, you know, and Call of Duty and all this stuff. And it's like, I talk to you and like I hear what you have to say, and it's like, we are just so numb to what is real right now in the world.
We are. Well, when I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my favorite thing to do on Saturday mornings was go next door. I had 2 cousins my age, and we'd lay on the floor and we would watch Victory at Sea. Did you ever see any episode of Victory at Sea?
Nope.
It was all about the conquest of the seas during World War II, mostly about aircraft carriers. It was a remarkable series. And we grew up on that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we were programmed to be GIs. But then we'd go out and play. And sometimes we'd play war.
Yeah.
We'd get sticks and we'd go and split into teams and we'd go around the house this way. We met up, we'd start going boom, 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 boom. You're dead. No, you're not. You missed me. Boom, boom, you're dead. We played guns.
Yeah. I used to do that too.
But we never did it with real guns. And
Yeah. Like the difference is like you're quite literally putting the gun in the kid's hand. And, you know, the Vietnam or whatever, right? It doesn't have to be Vietnam, but like Vietnamese people in the video game, and you're giving the kid the ability to kill him and see like the bullet go through him and die, you know?
because they're different people. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you get right down to it, I would love to see a program paid for by donations or whatever, that every kid who graduates from high school gets a year overseas
Mm-hmm.
with a stipend of, say, $1,000 a month. Just go to Rome, go to Italy, go to France, go to Germany, go to South America, go to South Africa, go to Russia, go somewhere where they don't speak English and live there for a year.
Mm-hmm.
You will come back with such a different attitude because you realize, wow, people are the same everywhere you go. They're just maybe a little different color and maybe speak a different language, but they're no different than you and me. They don't deserve to die
Mm-hmm.
violently. So, yeah, I've lived in, I don't know, a dozen different countries maybe, traveled to a bunch more, and I've always gotten along. I like people and treat them with respect and be kind. Works.
I'd like to travel to Europe and all that.
Yeah.
Just waiting for a COVID to blow over. You
Yeah,
know?
it's going to be a while. My wife and I love to travel. We had a big trip planned to Europe, but that looks like it's falling apart because that Delta version is
Mhm.
complicating things again.
What do you think about how, for like my generation, right? You have everyone's life is on pause at this pinnacle point in our lives. What do you think of that? versus you were like, when you were my age, you're off to war.
Yeah, well, it's just on hold. It's not like you stop living.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, good God, you're creating, you're doing art, you can do music, you can get together with close friends. I hope. Well, hopefully, some of your family have been vaccinated by now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't let the COVID get me down. I just, okay, I have to stay home for a while. And we did video, and we did Skype, and we did Zoom with our family, and we even had dinner parties by Zoom with our friends.
I love that.
What you eating? Oh, okay, we got this, and so on. Glass of wine, have a glass of wine. And then after about 6 months, I got bored, and then I started finishing off my third book. I just finished my third book. I got back today a printout from Kyoki. They do all my finalization for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a printout so I can go through and do my final edit and make it finished. And I got interest from a New York City agent.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Let's hear it. Talk about it.
My daughter, budding off the old block, is a writer.
Uh-huh.
And she wrote a novel. See, I have self-published my first 2 books.
How did they do?
I sold about 10,000 total.
That's pretty good.
For first-time author, well, it's
Yeah, that's really good.
First and second-time author, because it's 2 books, and it's also the e-versions.
Yeah.
But I've sold about 10,000 copies. It's getting very close. I need to do my counting. And so my daughter wrote a novel, but she wanted to go the traditional route. So she fished around and found an agent. And he found her a publisher, and she published through an agent, through a publishing company. And unfortunately, just at the time it was published, that's when COVID hit. She had a whole tour put together, book tour put together. She was going to go speaking and selling her book, and she couldn't go. So I don't think she sold very many copies. But she's already written number 2, and she's working on number 3.
What's her book about?
It's about a young girl whose name is Tallulah.
Mm-hmm.
And she lives in east of L.A. in the desert. And she grew up on an ostrich farm.
Cool.
And the name of the book is 146 Ostriches.
Is it a true story?
I don't know.
Uh-huh.
It's not. It's a novel.
Okay.
It's about the girl inherits the ostrich farm from her grandparents. And her brother, who has been a drug dealer and a druggie all of his life, didn't get anything, so he's pissed. And he's jealous, and he wants his share.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all the family interactions and the kids and the in-laws and the blah, blah, blah. And then the ostriches start dying, and it gets complicated with why are the ostriches dying and so on. So it's a good novel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not much of a novel reader, but anyway, she's working on another one. It's a big race that goes from Lake Tahoe to Sacramento over the mountains, and it goes up and down and up and down. It's like 100 miles in 24 hours, something like that.
Wow.
They actually do this shit.
That's crazy.
And she was preparing for a marathon when she broke her foot, so she couldn't do a marathon, but she loves running. So she got a press pass and went to this big race when it was happening last month, and went in and talked to the people and interviewed people and got all the details. So she's weaving it into her new novel.
That's really cool.
It's going to be a good story. This story will be good.
So what did the New York Times person say to you, though? Or not New York Times?
Well, he read my first 2 books.
Uh-huh.
And he said, and I told him there's a 3rd book in the making. He said, how would you feel about gathering all 3 of the best stories out of all 3 books and putting them all into one book? I said, well, yeah, I thought about doing that, actually. The hairiest stories, like I just told you, 2 hairy stories, and a bunch of others. I can put them all in one book. In fact, I already had a title in number 18, 19, 24, or whatever the number might be, hairiest missions of a helicopter pilot. But I told him, I have written this 3rd book, and it kind of has a broad spectrum of stories of all the various weird and crazy things I did. So let me send you that. Maybe you'd just be happy with that instead of me having to rewrite all 3 books.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent it to him on Google. What do you call that Google thing where you send it?
Google Drive.
Google Drive. And he downloaded it. He hasn't read it yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking forward to him coming back and saying, I like your story. I got a buyer. I got a publisher.
Cool.
See, I didn't want to do the regular publisher because I published my first book when I was 72. I didn't know if I was going to live 2 years, because it takes about 2 years to go through the regular publishing route. Just to find an agent takes a while, and the agent has to find a publisher. If I've got an agent and he's got a publisher, I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to wait. It'll still take a few months to change everything because they want to change the title and they want to change the cover and they want you to rewrite this. But I can do all that. So we'll see. I'm waiting for feedback from him. But I just got a copy of a rough draft from Kyoki today. And I'm going to spend the next week going through it, making lots of changes.
We better put my drawing in your New York book.
Mm-hmm.
Get that exposure. Do you want to talk about your books, though, for my audience?
Sure, yeah. The first book was about Vietnam, my experience there, and a little bit about training. And I pretty much covered that. We just supported the troops in the field as they were out there working. So, and then the two hairy parts I talked about. And then afterwards I got out and I went to work for the C.I.A. because I was out of default and desperation, actually. But it turned out to be a really fun time.
Mm-hmm.
Because about 20 or 30 of my colleagues and contemporaries from Vietnam ended up working for Air America too. So I had this group of friends that I'd been with through flight school, pre-Vietnam, Vietnam, post-Vietnam, reserves even.
That's a hell of a bond right there.
And yes, I mean, we were tight and close.
Uh-huh.
And my very best friend, who I got close to in Vietnam, I knew before, but I got close to in Vietnam, we palled around again together after Vietnam. And then he went to Air America first and wrote to me and told me all about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I went over, and I just took a lot of pictures. I always take a lot of pictures everywhere I go. And I collect stuff. I've got piles and boxes of shit. So basically that's how I take my notes. And then once in a while I kept a journal, not too often. But I kept a logbook. And in my logbook I always make a couple little notes about what happened that day. So enough to trigger a memory to say, okay, this day that happened and this day that happened. And so that's what my second book about is flying all over Laos for the Air America. And there were a couple of hairy times there too. So one time, after I'd been there I made captain right away. Mm-hmm. Everybody flew single pilot. So right after you got there, you got to be a captain. So I liked that. I wore the epaulets with the bars on them and that whole bit. Real airline captain looking uniform, white shirt with epaulets, and a little captain bus driver cap. It was all very official. We had airline benefits. We had reciprocal travel with almost every airline in the world. And I had a week off every month, so I could go somewhere every month. And I did. My buddy and I, we just made it a point to see the world while we could.
That's really cool.
We knew it wouldn't last. And so two hairy stories that came. Well, I was getting back to after I'd been there for 2 years, almost 2 years. We became aware that the enemy had the possibility of acquiring handheld heat-seeking missiles.
Wow.
Think about that. I mean, I'm used to getting shot at
especially
occasionally.
During that time, too.
Get mortared at occasionally in hazard and weather and other bad pilots and mid-air collisions and all kinds of stuff that can happen while you're flying, all kinds of mechanical failures. But the idea that the enemy had a handheld heat-seeking missile which they could pop, and even if you saw it coming, all you had time to do was think, oh, shit, and you're dead. So I thought, oh, wow, do I want to really stay with this job or not? So I talked to all my friends, and we all had the same agreement. We said that I'm going to hang around until the first one of these missiles is popped, and then if it's not me that's killed, then I'm quitting. Mm-hmm. So when the time finally did come, only two of us quit. Only one, my friend Paul, and I both quit. Said, okay, enough of this because they're shooting handheld heat-seeking missiles at us, and there's no survival in one of those.
No way.
As it turned out, nobody ever got shot down by one of those, but I couldn't predict the future. I didn't know that. And I had made enough money. I thought, okay, I just need to retire at this point at the age of 28. Mm-hmm. So I did. And because in those days, I was making the equivalent of today's money of $250,000 a year.
That's crazy.
For a young bachelor making $250,000 a year, just think about it.
Wow.
With a week off, with airline benefits. And whenever I went anywhere in the world, I got 20, 50, or 75% off on a Hilton or a Sheraton.
Holy shit.
So, I mean, I was being an international playboy and spending money like crazy, but saving a ton more because it didn't cost that much to do stuff.
Yeah.
So I could go around the world for $99.
That's crazy,
I could go
dude.
to the U.S. and back for $120, I think it was, on TWA.
Uh-huh.
So we just had a great time. But it began to get dicey, and the company decided, the company being Air America, the
Mhm.
CIA, decided that because it was getting scary and dicey, that we should no longer have single pilots. We should always have two pilots in every aircraft. And it was costing them a lot of money to pay two captains for every aircraft. So they decided they would cut a bunch of the senior captains down to first officers.
Mhm.
So I was in that realm of getting cut back to first officer, and I didn't like it. It cost me a lot of money. It cost me $1,600 a month. In those days, it was probably $10,000 a month today. But I went with it because I liked the job, and all my friends were there, and I was having fun. It was very interesting work, challenging work, but interesting and not real scary. But I jumped over to fly Hueys, and we had a different mission. We supported the secret CIA base at Long Chen.
Mhm.
In the center of Laos is this little valley called Long Chen. And the Air America had one of the busiest airports in the world for several years. I mean, we had more operations than some of the major airports. And Air America actually had a large air force.
Mhm.
So we were one of the largest air forces in the world, too, or airlines, not Air Force. And so I was doing this other mission, but we're flying out of the secret CIA base at Long Chen and supporting in addition to the 300,000 people that were displaced by the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the Laotian people wanted to defend themselves because they hated communism, and they didn't want the communists to take over their country. The communists already owned half their country.
Mhm.
They didn't want to give up the rest. So the Long Chen was their primary base. And they had a ridgeline and had about 7 outposts on it, heavily armed with artillery and lots of troops to keep the North Vietnamese from coming over into their territory. And our job was to support these people. So all those 300,000 people recruited all of their men between the ages of 16 and 60 and
Mhm.
made them soldiers and put them on the hilltops. And then we supported those soldiers to fight off the communists. And so that was our job. We'd carry supplies all day long, just from this valley up to that ridgeline, up valley, ridgeline, back and forth all day long, carrying everything we carried. Food, water, supplies, ammunition, artillery shells, artillery pieces, hospitals, corpsmen, medicine, whatever they need. One of the funnier things that we did was the local soldiers had a custom in one part of the year where they would sacrifice a live water buffalo
Whoa.
to their gods, and then they would barbecue it and eat it. But you can't transport a live water buffalo
Yeah.
in a helicopter because they're big and they're heavy and they are rambunctious.
They're buffaloes.
Yeah, so we couldn't, and you couldn't shoot one because it had to be live. You couldn't tranquilize it inside couldn't get it in a helicopter, and then you couldn't tranquilize it in there. So what they finally did is they got these big cargo nets where just a bunch of straps, like a big net. They would put it out in the ground. They would put the water buffalo in the middle of the net. They would shoot it with a tranquilizer, and it would collapse into the net. And we'd pick it up, gather the net up, and we'd carry that up to the troops in the field and give them their live water buffalo.
That's
By the
crazy.
time it got there, the shot had worn off, and it was alive again. It was awake, so they could kill it and eat it. It was pretty silly, actually, but we carried live water buffalo in our helicopter. So the cover of my book has that picture. Is it on there? Yeah, there's a picture right there.
Uh-huh.
This one. See the live water buffalo flying through the air.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. I'll put a picture in my description so you can see this because it's too cool. I love it.
So we would kill it and eat it, and then they'd be safe for the year. So they were Buddhist. They had their own little Buddhist and also animism type stuff going on. And typical tribes people, they had their own religion. I think they weren't all Buddhists, but Buddhism was part of it. So, but a couple of hairy missions there was during the before the missile were shot, and I quit. And I was flying co-pilot for senior guys. We were supporting the troops on that ridgeline.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big area in Laos called the Plain of Jars. Maybe you've heard that phrase, a plane of jars.
Mm-mm.
It's about 4,000 feet above sea level. It's about 40 miles by 40 miles, and it's this undulating plain of grass.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful place. It really is gorgeous, surrounded by mountains on all the sides.
That sounds really pretty.
And jungle. Well, this is where the big battles took place between the Laotians and the North Vietnamese.
Mm-hmm.
And we had airplanes out there flying around, dropping bombs, and mostly that was Laotians dropping bombs for their own army. Yeah, but we had observers out there, and they're called forward air controllers, but they were airborne. And once in a while, one would get shot down. So when we were working at the Longchen, we were always listening on the radio, and sometimes we could hear when one of the FACs got shot down.
Mm-hmm.
We would rush out there and rescue him, usually.
Mm-hmm.
Many, many times they got shot down, they spiraled down, they landed. But by the time he was out of his aircraft, our helicopter would be there and rescue him and take him home, leave the airplane. They would drop napalm on it and burn it up. One day, that similar thing happened. They were called Ravens. If you look on YouTube and look for the rescue of Raven 1-1, I actually rescued one of these Raven guys myself, and then my daughter made a documentary of it. So it's
Wow.
a documentary. It's about 25 minutes. The rescue of Raven 1-1 on YouTube, and that was fun to do. But one day I was flying co-pilot for this guy Ted, and we heard a Raven got shot down, and we flew out to the plain of jars. It's called the plain of jars because there are hundreds of gigantic stone jars.
Hmm.
Some of them are as big as a Volkswagen or bigger,
Uh-huh.
and they're huge and they're heavy, and the stone is not indigenous to that area.
That's weird.
The ancients, nobody knows who did this,
Yeah.
why they did this, or how they did this.
Aliens.
But there are hundreds of these big giant stone jars all over this plain.
That's crazy.
And some have lids, but most of the lids have been taken off. And they think they might have been burial urns, but nobody knows for sure.
Yeah. Well, if they're the size of bugs, you know?
Yeah, they're
That's
huge.
crazy.
They're tons. They weigh tons. Some are
Uh-huh.
smaller, some are bigger. But anyway, this guy got shot down. He's spiraling down. We're going out to rescue him. And we're talking to him on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting closer. We're going as fast as our little helicopter will take us. And he's spiraling down. We're talking to him. And finally, he gets down on the ground. He says, "I'm on the ground." So we got there. We find his airplane because we knew roughly where he was. And we look down. We can see his airplane. So we spiral down over his airplane
Mm-hmm.
to pick him up. And we landed beside his airplane. He's on the ground, dead. He's been shot in the head.
Oof.
I mean, how'd that happen? Who did that?
Yeah.
Somebody right there shot this guy in the head. And we're hovering over him.
Mm-hmm.
How many people are there who have rifles, AK-47s and or else whatever else, are now drawing a bead on us? We just hauled ass. We didn't try to recall. We didn't try to recover this guy's body. He was very dead. Again, a pilot on the right side could see more than I could see, but he could see the guy had a big hole in his head. He was obviously dead.
Yeah.
So there's no sense trying to rescue his body. So we hauled ass. But that was probably the scariest thing I ever did because I knew that somebody had just shot this guy,
Mm-hmm.
and we're hovering over him. Who shot him? Where are they?
Yeah.
Are they going to shoot us? And we carried machine guns. I had my machine gun at the ready at that time. You know what an Uzi is?
Yeah.
Uzi is an Israeli submachine gun. I had my Uzi out and cocked and loaded and ready to shoot back should anybody shoot at us. But nobody did. Talk about crazy.
That's crazy. And you got all these jars around here. You're like, why are the jars here?
I never saw a jar, actually.
Oh, okay.
But they're out there. If you look online, you research that, you'll find plain of jars. You'll see lots of pictures of them. It's crazy. It really is.
That's interesting.
General Westmoreland even had an Army flying crane go up and snatch one and bring it back to him so he could have one in his backyard wherever he lived.
That's ridiculous.
So, yeah. And then the last scary mission also didn't help my post-traumatic stress at all. Just a few days before I quit, I was flying co-pilot for the same guy that happened with the previous mission. And it was late in the day, and we knew from Vietnam and from experience you don't want to go flying low and slow over the jungle because late in the day the enemy knows they can shoot at you, and before you can call in the bombers it'll be dark.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't go out there and hover low and slow over the trees at night at dusk. But we were working with a C.I.A. operative, I think his name was Hambone.
Hambone.
His nickname, his handle was Hambone. And Hambone had some troops out in the field, and they were lost in the jungle, and he wanted us to go look for them.
Mm-hmm.
So only over the hill, not very far away from the secret base, we went over there, and we were hovering low and slow over the jungle looking for Hambone's lost troops. And somebody below us, it could have been his troops, we don't know who did it, opened up and just laced us full of holes.
Wow.
We had bullets go, several bullets hit our helicopter. The only time I really took a bunch of rounds. And so we left.
Mm-hmm.
We just hopped over the hill, went back to the secret base, and landed. Fortunately, nothing vital on the helicopter was hit. No fuel cells, no controls, no hydraulics, nothing, no people, except Hambone was hit. He lost about a 2-inch chunk out. Hambone lost a 2-inch chunk out of his shin bone, and he was bleeding all over the place. There was a big puddle of blood in the back.
Yeah.
And you could hear him crying out in pain. So we came back to the base and shut down and checked everything out, and the helicopter was okay. We flew it home for repairs. But what I discovered as I was climbing out, in the overhead, over the co-pilots, right there's a little window that you can look up, and it's dark green glass, or green plexiglass. It had a hole in it about that big enough to put a football through. I said, how'd that hole get there over my head?
Yeah.
There was no holes in me.
Yeah.
No holes in the window in front of us. No holes that I could see over here on the left door. And then I looked down, and I always carried a little aluminum clipboard that would clip to my knee for taking notes.
Yeah.
I wasn't wearing it at the time. I had put it on the floor between the pilots. A bullet had come up through the floor, through my clipboard, through the back of my seat, hit me right at my heart level, right in the back of my seat. But we had an armor plating seat inside the seat skin. So then the bullet hit the armor plating, skittered up between the armor plating and the seat, and went through the overhead.
Wow.
So that bullet had my name on it.
That is some divine intervention right there. That is crazy.
And it wasn't long after that somebody shot one of those missiles in our neighborhood. And I finally said, okay, fuck it, I quit.
Yeah,
I just bailed. I just went home. Screw it.
That's crazy.
I'd made a lot of money. I'd had a lot of fun. It was just, and I'd had another close call in addition to that. I had 3 close calls, all with the same guy in about 3 weeks. And I just said, I think the odds are getting stacked up against me here. It's time to leave. So I left.
That was that intuition.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you'd like to say? I've used plenty of your time.
Oh, heck. It's about intention. I think many, many times in life I've seen something I want to do, and just by committing to it, I've done it. Goethe, the German philosopher, French philosopher, I don't know his name or which nationality he was, has this great saying, and it is, whatever you can dream or think of, begin it. For boldness has magic and power and genius in it.
I like that.
Yeah, it's inspired me many times. So I can't
one.
do this. I can do this. I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
But once you commit, like say you wanted to go learn to be a pilot.
Uh-huh.
Oh, it's very expensive to learn to be a pilot. You're talking pointing $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 these days. I can't afford it. I don't have the money. Woe is me. I'll get a job and flip burgers. Okay. Well, if you really, really put your mind to it, you intend to do what you intend to do, things will happen to help you find them, to make them happen. Like we have a group here all around the country. There's this association called the Experimental Aircraft Association. We have a chapter here. It's a big one. We have probably 50 members, maybe 70.
Mm-hmm.
The main reason for our existence is we gather money to pay tuition for young kids to learn to be pilots. So we have put people through. We have 2 or 3 young ladies, all 3 now, who are now airline captains.
Wow.
Because they started out here with our assistance, and they put their intention to it, and they just went for it. They had to come up with a lot of other money on their own, support from parents and blah, 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 but they made it. And believe me, an airline captain makes big bucks.
Big bucks.
And has probably at least 15 days a month off to spend those big bucks.
Right?
and incredible benefits. And if you eventually retire, you've got travel benefits forever for the rest of your life. So you can go anywhere on any plane. I have
Yeah,
several friends who
totally.
are retired airline captains, and they just decide where do they want to go. They called up the airline and say, we'd like to ride, it's called Space Available. If there's room, you get to go. Sometimes they don't get to go, but then they
Hmm.
get to go somewhere else. So it's incredible benefits.
Sounds like I need to become a pilot then. I want to travel so much. I want to go to Iceland. You ever been to Iceland?
No, I've not.
I really want to go to Iceland. It's
Well,
very
here's
beautiful.
another thing I found in my life.
Uh huh.
Another way to travel and have fun and get paid for it is there's a school in San Francisco called International Tour Management Inc.
Okay.
It's the premier school in the world for learning to be a tour manager. If you go to that school, then you will be hired by all the major big tour companies to guide their tours anywhere and everywhere in the world.
Hmm.
You need to speak another language. I mean, that's one of the requirements to go to the school. But you can if you schmooze and talk and smooth your way through. I did it. I did it without language. So,
Nice.
and that's something else I did for a little while and quit. So,
How was that?
it was fun.
So like, who do you like? Do you tour for like celebrities or?
Well, no, there's a big company. Just like when you sign up to take a tour, they fly you to Europe and you get on a bus and you go to all these places. You get on the
Mhm.
bus, you get off the bus, blah, blah, blah. There's a big company called Mopin Tour. It's one of the foremost companies in the world. They hired me right out of school,
Wow.
and I did 3 tours for them. But then they wanted me to be gone away from home way too much. I was married, had 2 kids at home, and I was in the middle of a big land development project, and I just couldn't keep going away.
You keep just like bringing stuff up. I want to ask you so many questions, but I don't want to use too much of your time.
I was very scattered. I just kept trying different things. Even today, I'm always trying something new,
I try to do that too.
doing something different, and taking a flyer. What the hell? I'll take a flyer, see if this works. I tell my grandson everything I do is an experiment. Oh, I'll do this, see if it works. If it doesn't, oh well.
I think that is like another part of what you're saying with an intention is also like take every opportunity that comes your way,
Yeah,
good or bad.
yeah.
Or
I-
maybe not good or bad, but
One girlfriend accused me of being an opportunist. Well, what is an opportunist? Someone who takes advantage of opportunities that come his
Totally.
way.
totally.
I'm not embarrassed by that.
I think, yeah, I think another part is like what you said about fear. You know, you just cannot let fear consume you.
No, that's too bad that we have this attitude of fear in this country. And I'd like to do something to change that. Here's my last plug, and let me finish off with this. I've seen war firsthand. It truly sucks. I've seen people get blown up and die. I've seen people get burned up. I've hauled 600 or so dead or wounded Marines out of the field. And I've seen the tremendous waste of resources that war creates. So I have created an entity called 1% for Peace. It's on Facebook. I'm about to go big time with it otherwise. What if, think about this, what if we took 1%, we tax the military? The governments have always taxed the people that create war. What if the people taxed the military and just took 1% of the military budget and applied that towards peace, creating peace in whatever different way we could do it? Do you know 1% of our current military budget is now $20 million a day?
That's crazy.
Think about that. What could you do with $20 million if I said to you, here's $20 million for you today, spend it to promote peace? What would you do?
Go to Iceland. I'm just kidding.
No, I'm not talking that kind of peace. I'm
Uh-huh.
talking.
No,
The
totally.
women
You're
in
totally
Iceland are
right.
beautiful, I understand.
You're totally right.
So okay, and then so what? If the military didn't like it, they can just increase their budget by 1%, and then we'll still have the other 1% to spend to fight them. And then take it a step further. What if we increase that 1% every year by 1%? So 1% this year, 2% next year, 3% the next year, 4%. Even if it was just 1% forever, $20 million a day is a lot of money. You could do a hell of a lot of advertising. You could do a hell of a lot of educating. You could have poster contests. You could send all the kids to a foreign country, to high school, so we would learn about other cultures, not be so afraid.
Mm.
Think about that. I mean, what could we do at $20 million a day? What if we had, here's one of my pets,
Mhm.
what if we took It would take more than 20. It'd take more than one day's $20 million worth. Take several. But what if we decommissioned some of our big giant nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and made them aircraft carriers for peace? What if we had a squadron of helicopters and some airplanes on these aircraft carriers? And what if we positioned, say, 6 of them in various places around the world, full of portable hospitals, portable generators, portable water factories, lots and lots of food and supplies and medical supplies, and doctors and nurses. And then they were just on station everywhere in the world. Say they 2 months out at sea, 1 month in port somewhere, and just rotate. And whenever there's a natural disaster, we send the aircraft carriers there. An aircraft carrier can power a small city. And then we start using the helicopters to deliver food and doctors and water and hospitals and medicine and whatever else they need. Think about that. Wouldn't it be cool?
That'd be so cool.
All right.
I love that. I really hope that happens.
Well, I'm going to make it happen. You can help
Good.
me if you want.
I will. I am 110, 20 million% on board
All
with
right.
that.
Cool.
Perfect.
All right. Well, let's talk more about that because I really need someone young and vital and energetic to take over because I don't understand all the technology. I don't know how to do Twitter. I don't know how to do, I knew Facebook. That's where I started. And I don't know how to do all those other things where we need to get it out there. Once I just signed up for Instagram. I finally got that this week, but it's still confusing to me.
It's
And I need to make a website. Are you not a web designer, are you?
I'm not. But I
Okay.
can find someone.
We can hire that done.
Easy.
So think about that. I need help with this.
Totally.
I tried to give it to these people, but they haven't responded. So
These ones here?
yeah, because think about this. If
Yeah.
you started doing advertising, and then you do the GoFundMe online raising money to support this,
Mm-hmm.
to do more advertising, and you ask for donations, and pretty soon the money's going to start rolling in. And then you do more advertising and you get more donations, and pretty soon you hopefully have a lot of money to do. And then you got to get lobbyists, and you got to hire someone to lobby the politicians. And we got to educate the people and say, look, write to your senators, write to your congresspeople, and say, I will not vote for you unless you support this 1% for peace. I'm voting for Joe Blow or the other guy because he does, or he will. So we could force the government into peace. We could. And not just our country.
Mm-hmm.
If everybody in the world started doing this, forcing their governments to 1% of their budgets, their military budgets for peace. I think we could go somewhere with this.
That's a very ironic way of doing it. Huh?
Well, it's our tax money. We can do what we want with it, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So why not save the world? And in the meantime, we could also do stuff to ease global warming. I'm worried. I don't know if your kids, if you ever have kids, are going to have a world.
I really don't know. If
I'm worried about my grandkids and their kids.
Totally, I am too. I don't know if I'm worried for myself and the state of the world. The state of the world is almost to the point of hopeless, in my opinion.
It's scary. It's really scary. I mean,
Yeah.
I've always been an optimist because life has always been open to me, but I'm looking at the options are shutting down.
Yeah.
For not just for our country, but think of the poor people in Bangladesh and Vietnam and the Sahara Desert, and it was 121 and it was 130 in Death Valley a couple days ago, 121 in Canada somewhere. That's unheard of.
That is unheard of, right?
Yeah.
Antarctica was like 60 last year, you know?
Yeah, I've heard it was over 100 somewhere in the Arctic this year already. So
Wow.
In North Russia, I think.
That is ridiculous.
And the seas are rising, and a lot of the major cities will be flooded, and 1 billion refugees over the next 30 or 50 years.
Totally.
It's scary. And how are we going to feed all these people? We're not. A lot of them are going to die.
Totally.
Yeah.
With the 1% of the budget, though.
Well,
help.
you know, if we could take all the money that's going to war and put it towards developing alternative energies and underground, there's all kinds of things you can do, alternative energies. We could, this planet would support 20 billion if we did it right.
Totally.
Or it's not that there's too many people. Just too many people are greedy, and too many people have all the money, and too many people don't have enough.
Just so much going into the wrong places. Because like the amount of people in the world, if you put them shoulder to shoulder or even into a pile, it wouldn't even fill the Grand Canyon.
Oh no, oh no. No, when I was a kid, I read something that you could put all the people in the world in a box 1 mile square, cubed.
Yeah.
Probably be 3 miles on a side now, but so what?
So it's like there's plenty of room. It just I totally am on board with you when it comes to the military spending. It's like we spend so much money on that, but it's like, what are we gonna use it for? We're not supposed to go to war.
No,
I thought we were supposed
no.
to, like, everyone talks about not going to war, and that's I guess you already answered my question because you have that poster on your door that says I'm already against the next war.
Yes.
I was gonna ask you about that, but I don't even need to.
No, that's
You know?
it. I mean, I've seen enough of 2 wars, and so basically we now look at what we're doing in Afghanistan and Iraq. We go down over there and stirred up their countries and messed everything all up, killed a bunch of people. Now we're leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
I don't know why.
That's a good question. Why? That's in my first question in my first book is we need to ask ourselves why.
Yeah.
Our leaders, why?
Totally. Why are we building nuclear warheads that would quite literally just destroy the whole entire planet?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, how rich do you have to be to not die if the whole planet dies?
Yeah, I like
I mean,
that.
yeah, there might be a few little enclaves of people who are living underground and have built beautiful cities underground, but it's very few people, and it's just not right. I read a book called Merchants of Death,
Mm-hmm.
written in 1936. It's on my bookshelf if you want to borrow it.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, the guy said, the people who profit off war are the ones who create the wars. Because they'll invent a new weapon, and they'll sell it, say, to the United States. And then the United States has this really cool new weapon. But then the merchant will go over to Russia and say, hey, the United States has this weapon. You better buy it, or else they're going to attack you. Fear. Getting back to the fear thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So they do that. And it's been happening ever since the longbow was invented.
Totally.
Yeah. Oh, the English had the longbow. The French didn't. The French lost. Did you ever know the Battle of Agincourt was
Mm-hmm.
nasty? The English could shoot thousands of arrows up into the air. It would come down like hail.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody in that area would die.
Totally.
Everybody would die. And the French had bows, but they couldn't shoot as far. So they couldn't defend themselves, so they lost.
Mm-hmm.
So that same thing. Then I'm sure some salesman from England went over to the French later and said, hey, you lost because the English had the longbow. You better buy longbows from me. And they probably did. The whole book is about how that happens time after time after time.
It's true.
And has happened for all of history.
Yeah, that's totally true.
Yeah, it's disgusting. It really is. All right. Anything else? Any more questions?
No, I mean, of course, we could be here all night, but maybe we'll do another episode.
I would love to do one just on the peace thing.
I love it. I love it.
So I have several other really good ideas of what I would do with $20 million a year.
Like what?
Well, send the kids off to college or
Uh-huh.
traveling. Okay, I got them written down somewhere. Massive advertising.
Mm.
What if you just had a massive advertising campaign
Totally.
and have sexy girls? You think sex doesn't
Sexy.
sell?
Oh,
Have sexy girls saying to soldiers,
totally.
I'm not going to date you because I don't like war. Do you think what do you think a soldier's reply to that
Well,
would be?
it's like you're totally right. That is 100% true because it's like, you see the war movies and they got the cigarettes and they're like looking all cool and it's like, I want to go to war and smoke a cigarette. That sounds dope.
Yeah.
You know?
Fine
It's
until
like,
you watch your buddy get a bullet in the eye.
yeah, you're totally onto something. You're totally onto something.
Yeah.
I love
Thanks.
it.
Yeah.
Of course. Down below, there will be pictures of some of the things me and Bill talked about during this episode. Also down there will be a link to both of my Instagram accounts. One is the official podcast Instagram where you can receive news and updates on future episodes. And there's my art Instagram account where you can see the kind of art I like to create and what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. Until next time, farewell.